Hey everyone, welcome to the Hacktorial. We're going to get started pretty soon. Let's check and make sure that link works. Let's make sure that link works. Did you paste the streaming link? Cool. Cool. Hey everyone, we're gonna get started now. All right. Well, thanks for coming out. My name is Jeff. We're going to teach some design today. It's gonna be pretty fun. First of all, quick show of hands. Who installed Illustrator successfully? All right. Yeah. That's incredible before Hacktorial. Awesome. For those who didn't, it seems like ter.ps is down, and you can still install like a trial and get through today. Yeah. Awesome. So yeah, welcome. Today, this Hacktorial is called Design for Devs. the idea is that presumably everyone in this room is some sort of developer or otherwise has no design chops. And the goal is to be able to teach design in a way that is usable by developers. I don't think anyone here is going to hop into Illustrator and start making logos for a living, but there's a real awesome way to be able to use design in the things that you guys already do, in front-end development, in UX prototyping and such, that will really help your products communicate the right things. So yeah, throughout the talk, for people watching the stream and for people here, if you have questions, if you're here, you can just raise your hand. Otherwise, feel free to tweet at me. That's we have like a thing up here, so that'll be good. Alrighty. So how can we design without designing? As I just said, who here has done any front-end work? All right, awesome. So front-end, of course, being pretty much the user-facing side of any application. In front-end, there's a lot of decisions that you have to deliberately make. How big to make something, how far apart, what colors to use. And in making those decisions, there's ways that you can do that better without necessarily making a mock-up beforehand or things like that. So while a lot of people might say that no, you need a designer to make this product or something like that, the goal is that hopefully people can use really good design principles in their product development. So my goal is that through understanding contrast and proportions, everyone here will become better designers. I think these are two pretty key ideologies or principles that really help the design work. It's not necessarily saying use contrast and proportions, but it's saying to understand it and to use it effectively when you can. So first, contrast. What is contrast? It's a question for the audience. Brave soul.
Difference between the foreground and the background.
Okay. Anything else? Dark and light. So contrast really just means the difference between anything. It's usually thought of as color, right? If two colors are, when placed on top of each other, are visible with each other, then that's contrast, right? It doesn't necessarily make for good design when you use high contrast colors. There's a whole world of contrast outside of color and hues and lightness and darkness and everything else. And so really understanding how to use contrast in other aspects of a design is really important. So there is, color is a pretty given example, right? To be able to differentiate colors. But obviously that looked pretty bad. Hierarchy is pretty important. Hierarchy means the difference between elements and how important they are. So on this page, what is the most important thing? Register, right? And that's made clear through a very hierarchical system. Some of the other words might not have had the same emphasis on that button the same way the register button does. Same idea here. This is actually a pretty common pattern. I guess I showed two pretty similar examples, but using contrast to differentiate hierarchy is really important. Deciding what on your page is the most important thing, driving that, and then having the layers down until you get to the things that aren't as important, like details and body and stuff like that, body text. By the way, just to preface this talk, we're going to go through some principles and then get hands-on in Illustrator, so it's coming. All right, layout. Layout's also really important. In this case, this is not good design, right? We haven't used enough contrast between what is text and what is background. And so simply by using margins, we can separate those. That's a pretty huge thing. Margins are usually a good thing. When used correctly, they can really spice up a design. And you can see the difference in how easy text is to read. So consider layout also when dealing with contrast. Grouping and separation. This is what is alike and what is different. In this case, these are three buttons. They're exactly the same, besides the content inside. And so how can we make one the same style, but give emphasis? Here are a bunch of different ways to do that. Some are better than others. And the point here is that as you see in this bottom left part, we've used a different font. When considering grouping and separation, the contrast you want to make is for the details of it, like the emphasis. It's not in the element itself. So in this case, by changing the font, it almost makes this button a different group. It says it's not the same as the others, instead of just providing a layer on top of that, which would be emphasis, as done in pretty much the top 3 rows. So consider that. What should be the same and what should be different? Typography. This is something that, contrast can come in and really differentiate a header versus a body versus a link. And I'd say a pretty common design crime, as some would say, is to use 2 similar fonts, as in TOO similar fonts. If you're using a sans serif font, which means that there's none of those little hanging things off the edges, if you're using 2 of those together and they're 2 the same, or they're 2 similar, then they won't differentiate at all. If you're using 2 sans serif or serif fonts together, it won't differentiate. And so it should be considered when you're putting your designs together, very deliberately how you're using these fonts. Whether you're differentiating with the font weight, the font size, the location, the typeface itself, that's something to really consider. And so when you are trying to separate these different elements, using typography that's different enough or exactly the same is something that can be considered. So within contrast, it goes beyond colors, it goes into these things as well. All right, so now onto proportions. Proportions are pretty cool. They're like the beautiful math part of design. And this is where I have a lot of fun, and actually like living by understanding proportions is how my personal visual styles come out. I kind of I design with proportions like as the law, right? So first of all, understanding geometry. Geometry is pretty cool. Using it as inspiration, look around at how nature does things and how shapes are used in different places. It's just like a good primer. There's no real like there, but understand geometry first of all. Now, this is where it starts to get fun. The numbering systems. When you're, design takes a lot of values. Front-end development takes a lot of values, right? How big should this margin be? What font size should I use? How far apart are these? How close are they? Things like that. And generally, when putting a layout together, numbers come in a lot. And so having a real solid number system will help you make decisions on how big or small to make things. For instance, in mobile development, in iOS and Android, they use an 8/16/24 numbering system, which means that, for instance, the padding around the edge of the screen is always 16 pixels, or 8, or depending on the app. But you can pretty much go through every element of your phone and understand how big things are by taking a guess, because these numbers are different enough that you can kind of if the 8 pixel is too small, then jump it up to 16 and see if that works. That's how numbering systems can really be used effectively. In web, the tens are used a lot. And so here's an example of how a numbering system can really provide order to what you're making. This is a fun app I made once, and this is by a 8/16/24 system. So all of the same color lines are the same size. And the rest are pretty much multiples or divisible by each other. So even if it's not necessarily intentional how you're using it, just strictly using a numbering system will provide this beautiful order to your apps or websites that you might not have done before. And now people are realizing that numbering systems are really, really important. And so for the first time and this is straight out of Android's material design style guide, numbering systems are really being used extensively. So I don't know if you can see, but there's 16, 72, and then on the right we have proportions of the other parts. And so they really do provide order. And when you're going through a design and you don't know how big or small to make something, I would suggest trying out within a certain numbering system. For mobile, again, that's 8, 16, 24, etc. And for web, it's often done in tens. So numbering systems, really cool. Yeah. Grids. Grids are this like holy thing on top of all of that. Grids are, I mean, yeah, grids. It's pretty much saying that it takes this number system idea to a whole new level by giving kind of a backdrop to anything you're making on top of it. By using grids, you can really start off your design in the right way. So, for instance, here's a logo, right? And every single point on this logo, on this type, is made in the grid. Deciding, that okay, it'll be 2 boxes tall, and there's 8 subdivisions between each of those. It really helps you keep your order, correct, and then guides the design. Careful how much you use grids, I'd say. Recently, I've gotten like almost too into grids. I'm a huge grid fanboy, and everything is just like painfully geometric and simple. But using them as this very core guiding principle is definitely going to be helpful, especially for web. Web grids, has anyone heard of like the 960 grid, for instance? Anyone? Awesome, 1 or 2. So that pretty much says that web can be divided into 12 columns or 16 columns or 24 columns with gutters between them. And so, have you seen like a product page with like 3 columns of text for like 3 features? So like a pretty popular design pattern. That's all done really easily when you're using a grid system. So if you're not designing in, there are ways to use grids straight in front end in Bootstrap, or just applying a grid system on a normal web page. This is now, again, straight out of Google's Material Design Guide, really showing, again, how grids can be used. Actually, this doesn't illustrate it very well at all. It's just a grid with a picture on top. But I promise, use grids from the beginning, and the designs will always come out more ordered and cleaner. Cool. Aspect ratio. So aspect ratio is pretty much what is the ratio between width and height. This isn't so much a, there's really not much of a tip here, but just understanding how aspect ratios work, knowing that certain screens have different ratios and we'll see different things, knowing that some pictures are best displayed in a certain aspect ratio, and if you stretch them into a different aspect ratio, it'll throw it off. Generally, when I use pictures in web, I try to stick to popular aspect ratios. Again, it just allows you to make a decision about how big something should be instead of being completely arbitrary, and allows you to just quickly prototype much faster. Using a square, or a 16 by 9, or a 3 by 4. That's again another really good ordering principle for design. So within proportions, we've got just experiment with geometry, different geometry. Use a numbering system for sure. Use grids as much as you can without letting it take over your design, and then understand how aspect ratios work when dealing with assets. All right. On top of all that, if those are the 2 guiding principles, what is style? Style is kind of a loose area where breaking the rules or really pushing one of the rules to its limits can define your visual style. It's not something we'll really talk about, but know that every rule here is meant to be broken, and that's a style on top of a very strict ordering principle or ideology. Okay, so let's do a quick exercise using some of what we just learned. This is the ever popular Hacker News. Can anyone point out, based on some of the underlying principles of geometry and proportions and contrast and everything else, what in this site can be improved?
There's not much padding between things, so it's kind of.
Why is the padding important?
Because it's like too contrasted. It just looks weird. It's hard to see the different lines.
Yeah, exactly. So that's in the separation and grouping part. Since they're so close together, it's hard to tell where one element starts and stops. We can obviously see each individual character, but if you blur your eyes a little bit, it all kind of blends in. So I think padding would absolutely improve this, to be able to differentiate between articles. Actually, what I just mentioned there is a pretty helpful tip. if everyone kind of like unfocuses, blurs their vision a little bit and looks at things, you should be able to really see the difference between elements. This is a great test if you're trying to figure out how a user uses your site or your app or anything. Doing a blurred vision test can really pick out what the core problems are in an app, whether it's the color or the spacing or anything else. All right, so that's one thing, more padding between articles. Any other tips to throw around?
The top bar is going to use there's a really big difference in contrast between the title bar and the rest of the content. And so difference in contrast is
Different in contrast between the nav and the rest? Okay, yeah, that's I mean, I think that was like an intentional design choice to make the nav a different color, but it's a valid point in that that's really the only use of orange there, right? Usually an accent color is used to accent things, to provide emphasis. And if the emphasis is on the most stable thing on the site, it doesn't really add any guidance when you're using a site. It doesn't add any user experience advantage. For instance, to go off what you said, maybe using orange in like, what's a popular thing? Clicking comments or like upvotes or something else would be a great way to use more accent colors to distinguish what should be done on a site instead of staring at a blank canvas with tons of emphasis thrown at the most stable, common part of the site. So great point there. Okay, so as you can see, like using some of these principles of contrast and proportions, you can really easily tear apart a site and understand what is good and bad about it. I think if a site is designed poorly, there's not necessarily a reason to go back and start from the ground up. But you can always go back to old projects or things you have existing and just see how implementing some of these techniques can boost the design of what's already there. Cool. So that's kind of the intro of how to be a good designer without ever like actually designing for design's sake. How to incorporate design ideologies in a developer workflow. We went pretty fast through it, and I'll like take questions in a sec, and then we'll hop into actually using Illustrator, venturing into the frustrations of a designer and everything that there is to that. The reason that we're going to learn Illustrator is because it allows us to quickly, or not quickly, but it allows us to design from the ground up in like a very fundamental way, and learn some of these design principles from the design angle, while still being able to incorporate those principles into your dev workflows. So we'll take questions. Just so you know, this talk or this slide deck is on this link, and you're still welcome to ask questions here if you're online. But any I'll just throw it out there. Any design questions for now? Nothing. Yes?
How do you decide what numbering system to use?
Okay, good question. So how do we decide what numbering system to use? As I said, the Android and iOS will always use this 8, 16, 24, 36, or 32 system. It actually used to be in 12s, but now Android has kind of stabilized. That's actually pretty awesome because if you're designing for multiple platforms, you can design in one numbering system and then just adjust the aspect ratio to fix. But actually your spacing and things like that, if something's spaced 16 apart, you can maintain that between platforms. Web is kind of the wild web. You can pretty much choose whatever you want because there aren't, it's such a vast system that there aren't exactly these like principles that any one party can limit it to. I would suggest on web using either the 16 system or the just 10s, 10, 20, 40, 60, 80, and then go to 5 if you need something really small. What that allows you to do is incorporate with like normal like 960 grids or normal aspect ratios. It fits a little better, and it especially helps when you're dividing things. Oh, that's a good point. When using a numbering system, the goal is to be able to stick to those numbers exclusively. And if you have to divide things, try to divide in half because that keeps to the number system. If you end up dividing in thirds, if you take like 16 over 3, you'll get funky pixel, subpixel stuff going on, and you don't want to deal with that. So there's a note there. But yeah, so for web, it's pretty much whatever you want. I would suggest using 10s. For mobile, use the 8s and 16s. Cool. Yeah.
We can talk about color at all.
Color, yeah, we can talk about color when we get to Illustrator, like making a color palette and what Sure, yeah. I have a technique I use on every single project that we can go over there. Remind me if we don't get to that when we hop in Illustrator. Cool. Any other like general questions about some of the principles we went over? Alrighty. Well, at that point, why don't we open Illustrator? So, a few fundamental things about Illustrator that everyone should know. Illustrator is a vector design platform. What that means is that in vector, shapes are made with paths. Paths are made with math. It's a pretty magical thing in that you don't have to worry about how big things scale. In raster images, like a PNG or a JPEG, it's pretty much a grid of pixels, a grid of different colors. And that doesn't scale. A grid will never scale when each pixel is defined. But in vector images, you have math. And math can, you can 2 times 2 is 4. And you can always scale things, right? So that's kind of how vector works. It's not good for photos. Note. So Illustrator is a vector platform. It operates totally in vector. You can use raster images in there, but it's not really designed for that. I like to use Illustrator. I'm one of the few who uses Illustrator for user interface design, but I think from the beginning it's a great way to learn because you can either hop into Photoshop or into something like Sketch, which uses a vector workflow as well. And you'll know your way around. Illustrator is actually a pretty advanced tool. You can do a lot of pretty incredible things. It's not your everyday paint, but it's pretty intuitive to get started. So why don't we start with colors? We'll familiarize ourselves with some of the interface and just understand some of this color stuff at the same time. So in Illustrator, first we're going to have everyone click Window and Align. Bring that Align up. It's not stock, but you'll need it all the time between Align and Transform. So just have that there because I'll be using it. So on your left, we have, this is the toolbar. On your right, we have the floating panels. On the top is our frame, and then our artboard in the middle. So on the left, can everyone grab the rectangle tool and just come over to the artboard and drag a nice rectangle or square. If you hold Shift, like most programs, you can get a perfect one-to-one on this. All right. We're going to actually make a couple squares. Let's say 3 squares, right? Okay. Does everyone have 3 squares on their screen? Oh, I'm so sorry. Okay. Man, this is it's something I just do, I guess. To do the copy through dragging, well, first of all, you can copy paste with Control-C and V or Command-C and V. To drag and copy, on Windows it's Alt, and on Mac it is Option. So if you click something while holding Option, you can just drag it and create a new one. Cool. Most of the controls are pretty similar to the shortcuts you use elsewhere. That one's pretty new though. Cool. So does everyone have 3 boxes on their screen? Awesome. So every shape in Illustrator has a fill and a stroke. A stroke means an outline. And those colors are shown up here. Does everyone see that in the top left? What we're going to do first is actually, let's go to this fill and just pick any color you like, just to get started. Fill is on the left, stroke is on the right. And then for stroke, you can click that and click the red slash to just make the stroke go away. That means transparent. There's no stroke. Cool. Does everyone have 3 solid rectangles on their screen? Thumbs up, just so I know. Awesome. Stop me if you're having a problem. So now we've made vector shapes. Congratulations, everyone. Let's get into colors, like this gentleman asked before. So a great way to do colors is, or a technique that I use is using hue, saturation, and lightness, or luminosity. That's HSL if you're doing code and need to type that in. So the way to change a color, with the color picker is to select the object and double click on this big box over here. So it's different from the frame view. It's on the left side. Does everyone have this color picker up? Awesome. Yes.
So how do you fill this thing again?
How do we fill?
Yeah, what's the guy that fills the square?
Oh, sure. So we have a rectangle over here on the top left.
Oh, yeah.
That's just like the quick, using their preset colors, and you can just click through. And then on the right is the stroke or outline, but we don't want a stroke right now. All right. So now we have 3 boxes. They're all solid. We click one. We go to the color picker on the left. If, by the way, any point your cursor becomes a different, tool, just go back to this black cursor icon on the top left, and it'll get you back to home base. All right, so now we have our color picker. I like using HSB, which is in the top here. RGB is a pretty standard way to represent colors, as is CMYK for print. But using HSB allows us to do this awesome ordering thing. So what we're going to do to start is pick any color on here and lock in the saturation and brightness values. So what that means is that we're going to hold pretty much the same color properties and then change the hue to make them match in like style, pretty much. So let's make saturation 60, that's S, and B for brightness, let's make that 80. All right. Actually, yeah, 80 is fine. Cool. So now we have one color, right? The hue doesn't really matter. You can pick any color you want. But remember that 60 and 80. So now we'll go to the next box. By the way, I just clicked OK at the bottom to confirm that, or on the top to confirm that. Now we can go to the next box, and remembering the saturation and brightness, we can make a color palette that matches. So we have this lovely magenta. We'll go over and throw a blue in there. And remembering those values from before, 60 for saturation and 80 for brightness, we can make a blue that matches pretty well. You can do this for any number of colors you want, except yellow. Yellow always breaks things. Don't use yellow unless you know how to use yellow. It will break everything. But let's throw in a different color, orange. Let's get an orange in there. Cool. So we'll bring saturation to 60 and brightness to 80. And so what you see here is that like the colors go together in like how they look. It's not necessarily the most thought out color palette for a project you're working on, but when assembling that color palette, using the locked in saturation and brightness will really help them go together. On top of that, you can tweak things. If maybe a hover state needs a darker color, you can lower the brightness on one of the colors, or things like that. But in terms of getting some baseline colors to go together, that's a pretty good strategy to get started. All right. Did everyone get through that? Pretty good? Cool. So you familiarized yourself with Illustrator. That's awesome. We know our way around. All right. So now I think we're going to hop into making a pretty simple music player app. Again, the point of making a mock-up is to communicate with developers or to practice design. But in the end, the end game is to make a working product out of this. And so everything you do in a mock-up should be able to communicate with a developer or with yourself if you're the one who also codes it. Cool. In the Dropbox link, does everyone have that? If we go to, this event, there's a Dropbox link somewhere. Oh, let me reload. Alrighty, awesome. So if you go to the Dropbox link, you can download some of these source files that we're going to use in Design for Devs. Oh man, that's embarrassing. It has my resume there. I'm just going to delete that. Or never mind. Okay, so Design for Devs. There's some source files here. Just download the folder, and we can hop right in. Start by opening Android 1. I left a blank version in there if you want to use this technique later. There's a blank one that you can go to later. But hop into Android 1, and we'll get started. So Android 1 should look something like this. It's actually using the old Android styles. Yeah. Like from Dropbox, the website. Top right, download a zip. You see that in the overflow menu? Awesome. Cool. So open up the Android 1 file. So this is a pretty stock. I got some of the stuff out of the way just so we can understand that it's an app, right? It's got the stock Android toolbars in there, the system stuff, and then a nav bar with a placeholder icon for the image there. So we're going to make a music app. It's going to be pretty fun. Cool. Is everyone at this stage right now? No. Has everyone downloaded the source files from Design for Devs? It's too large? How big is that? Really? Oh, why is that so big? All right, just download Android 1 then. I don't know why it's so big. That's kind of funky. Okay, it's Pixicon. All right, I'm going to delete the icon pack. Cool. All right, so does everyone have Android 1 downloaded? Don't worry about downloading the whole thing. Does everyone have? What? We killed Dropbox Public. Same way we did terpware. Down with all the sites. Really? Everyone, go to umd.edu. Okay, well, we broke it. That's awesome. Let's see. I will upload it as a file on Facebook. Wow, how many people are here? Can you upload a file this way? Let's see. All right, so Dropbox. All right, it won't let me upload. Huh. All right, let's try going. Does anyone have it? Is it still down? Oh my gosh. All right. Let's see. Google Drive. One moment, everyone. Let's get this one. Yeah.
It says that the account is publicly.
Yeah, that seems to be it. It's all good. It's all good. So I'll get this sharing on Google Drive then. All right, let's make sure everyone can download it. Get shareable link. All right, cool. So take two. Everyone go to the Facebook event and reload. Try downloading that. And if this doesn't work, we'll just go and create what I created from scratch. It's not that bad. Cool, so I'll give that 30 seconds, then we'll hop back in. Are we having luck with Google Drive? Oh, so from here, how does one download? Yeah, download's just on the top bar right there, the down arrow. You should be able to download that as an AI and then open it straight in Illustrator. Cool. Thumbs up if you have it. All right. If anyone else, carry on if it's working. Otherwise, just create a. We'll go to Illustrator and create a Control-N or Command-N. Go to Profile, click Web, and in width we'll put 360. In height we'll put 640. That's the Android frame. So it's pretty close, and we can keep chugging along. All right. So from here, awesome. I'm glad some of us have made it. we're going to make a music player app. So what are the elements of a music player app that we should have in the most basic version of it? What? Play button. Cool. What else? What? The song name? Stop. Stop too. And song name. Fast forward. Okay. What? Music files. That's too much. This app plays one song and one song only. What was that? A scrubber. So like a timeline. Cool. And maybe album art. Awesome. Cool. Let's start with album art. That's a great idea. So we're going to put just a placeholder in there. Or it's a solid album cover. Some new hipster artists these days. So we're going to grab the rectangle tool on the left, and while holding shift, just drag out an arbitrary square. Cool. As we learned before, we're going to go to the top left and pick any color you want. We're going to go with We're going to go with green. Cool. All right. So now that we have this is our album cover. As you can see, it's pretty haphazardly thrown around, and we'll use this numbering system to quickly lock it into place. So if we remember, the width of this Android screen is 360 pixels, or DP in Android, but actually it doubles. Anyway, it's 360 pixels right now. What we can do is go to Transform, and again, if you don't have Transform, just go to Window, Transform. We're going to go to Transform and go into the W for width. Make sure this link is locked. That means that the width and height will scale proportionally and maintain the aspect ratio that's there now, which is a square, 1:1. So we'll grab this width, and if we remember that the width of this, the entire frame is 360, we can type 360 minus, and we'll decide what padding we want on the side of the screen. So if we remember, 16, 32, 64 is often used in mobile, so we'll use that this time. So if we want 16 pixels of padding on each side, we can say 360 minus 16 times 2, which is 32. 360 minus 32, and we have the width of our album cover. Awesome. Was that too fast? Thumbs up if we're good. Temperature check. Cool. What was that? Pull up Transform by clicking Window and then Transform. Again, for some reason, this is like the most used thing in Illustrator, but it's not one of the stock windows. If that's for whatever reason not working, most of these properties are in the top bar also. Yeah. Can't edit it. If you can't edit it, click Layers and make is the layer that you're selected on, does it have a lock on it perhaps? Here, let me just take a look. All right, everyone who had a locked screen, for anyone who had a lock, like an X3 or drawing tool, go over to the Layers panel. For some of you, it might just be icons. It's this like diamond-shaped thing. And just click off the locked layer, which is System. Yeah, cool. So uncheck that, or go to the Content window is really what we should do. All right, and then you can draw your rectangle again. Sorry, I must have locked the layer for everyone when I uploaded. So now, are we still following along? We've got a square. We've made it width 360 minus 32. What was that? Did you have that?
I just did a square to I just want to know what you did.
Okay, so in Transform, all we did was a little arithmetic. We selected the rectangle. We typed in 360, which is the total width of the screen. And we want to make 16 pixels of padding on each side. So we just subtract 32, which is 2 times 16, minus 32. And we have this perfectly sized rectangle, square. Cool? All good. All right. So now at this point, we're going to worry about the position. Assuming this is the size we want it, what we can do is in the Align panel, which should be right next to Transform, we're going to click Align. Make sure you're aligned to Artboard and that bottom. Oh, you don't have Show Options, do you? You should all be aligned to artboard anyway. What we can do is quickly align to center. Do you see that? It's the second option on the align panel, and it should lock that guy in the center. Cool? We have a centered album artwork. All right. Now what we're going to do is worry about the top size. So right now we've got it perfectly sized. We've got it centered horizontally. We're going to make sure the top height is good. So what we can do is grab our object while holding Shift, and we can drag it around in this vertical line, right? What we're going to do is drag it right up to the top of that nav bar, like that. It should have like a little green or some color guide that says you are touching, and then you can let go. Cool. Is everyone aligned to the top? Awesome. So now from here, what we can do is go back to transform. Transform also deals with the position of an object. So we can just add 16 to the Y. Just click in the Y bar, go to the end and write plus 16, and we should have it right there. Cool? Does everyone have on their screen what we see here? Yes.
So the axis begins at the top left corner?
Okay, we can talk about reference points real quick. So the way that Illustrator works, or most design software will work, is you have a reference point. A reference point means wherever I do an operation, it will affect that or lock into that spot. So that's what these, what was that? Okay, cool. So that's what these 9 dots are. It represents each corner or middle point or center of the object. And so right now it's probably defaulted to the middle one. But for instance, if I clicked the, no one should do this, don't follow along, but if I click the top left one, that means that top left point is fixed. And so if I adjust the width, if I make this 400, it will lock to that top left point. If I then lock it to the bottom right, I can do more funky things, and it'll lock the bottom left. Cool. So no one do that, but that's how reference points work. Since we were simply adding and subtracting, it didn't really matter there.
Right. When you're adding Y, right?
Yeah.
It goes down.
It goes down.
And you're subtracting.
Oh, so yeah, the canvas numbers will start, the Y position X, it's the top left. So if we are on the middle reference point and we zero out, like this, it'll be there. See?
Okay.
Cool. So that's where the canvas reference point is for X and Y. Good point. All right. So now we have our album artwork. It's pretty generic. We'll call this Hacktorial, the album. You don't need to write that, just for funsies. All right, cool. So at this point, let's get into the scrubber, the player area. So we said we want a play button, a stop button, a pause, a skip, all that jazz. We're gonna make a play button and a timeline. Cool. So let's start by making another rectangle. Grab the rectangle tool. This time we're gonna position our cursor so that the little guide arrow or the guide line comes down from the left side of the album artwork. Cool? Does everyone see that? And then just drag out until it aligns with the right side. Again, those guidelines should really help you align that there. And we'll just make a pretty slender box. Cool. This box will make the same color as the top. The way I did that was we used the eyedropper tool. You can press I or go to the left and click the eyedropper icon right here. And so while selected on an object, you can grab the color or visual style of another object. And we'll just make that red. Cool. So now that we have our slender object, we're going to position this, again, using the numbering system. But this time, we want to separate it a little more. If we remember, separation and grouping is one of the major principles of contrast. Let's say that we want our song information on top and our player on the bottom. We can later add a song title or something to it also. But we want some clear separation between those elements. So let's put this group a little more towards the bottom. So first, align it up to the top or to the bottom of the album artwork. And this time, we will add to the Y. Let's add 64. Again, using that number system, but knowing that we want to jump a few steps up from 16. We want it spaced out a little more. From here, now that the top is positioned perfectly, we'll grab the top left reference point, knowing that the top will now lock, and we'll pick what height we want for this. First, we're going to want to unconstrain on the right. That's the link, which pretty much says, now if I adjust the height, it won't scale with the same aspect ratio. From here, we can make this, let's say, 32 pixels. So type 32 and enter. Your screen should look like that. Are we good? Cool. Awesome. If you're having trouble, let me know. So this will be our scrubber. We'll also talk about opacity here, because why not? What we can do now is click on this, this new slender rectangle we made and press copy and then Control F. What Control F does, or Command F for Macs. What Command F does is we've pasted in place. So while it might not look like it, we now have two rectangles on top of each other. Leave it where it is though, because what we're going to do is just pull from the right back some ways, and then we'll make it white. So go into your color picker and just write a bunch of Fs. Now it's white. And I'll go over this again, but we'll get all the way through. And then adjust the opacity. So now we have sort of a scrubber. Or actually, it should be the other way around, really. That would represent a song that is not finished. Cool. Okay, so what we did there, we grabbed the copy of the rectangle, which is on top of the bottom one. We've made it white by going to the color picker and typing in FFF, which is the hex code for white. We've pulled it over from the left using the bounding box, like PowerPoint would. Just grab it and pull it over to an arbitrary point, doesn't matter. It's any point in the song that is on Hacktorial, the album. And then we've gone to the top where it says opacity. Does everyone see that when the object is selected? Make sure the object is selected, go to opacity, and just type 50. And so it's pretty much placing a white object on top of a red object. Cool? Does everyone have this? Thumbs up? Yeah? Anyone not good? Anyone have questions? That was pretty fast. Yeah? So I've made the smaller box, the white one, just to represent like the track that's remaining. Cool. Everyone doing good? You caught up? All right. Quiet down, y'all. Quiet down. We're going to move on to the next step. Yeah. Oh, so what Command F does is if you copy and paste something, if you copy and paste something, it'll paste it wherever it wants. What Command F does is it pastes something in the original copy location. So we've pretty much duplicated this object right in the same place. Awesome. Okay, so at this point, we're going to throw in the pause button. Or let's just call it a stop button to make things easy. Grab the rectangle one more time and draw one more arbitrary rectangle. Cool. This time, we're going to make the stop button 48 pixels, which is again within the 16 pixel numbering system. So now we have this rectangle of 16 pixels. We're going to place it right in the middle. And the way to do that is by really bringing it anywhere and going to Align and Center. And now I'll put it right in the middle. Cool. Actually, that's hideously large. Let's make it 32. Yes. Yours is not doing anything. Let's check it out. All right, everyone try to get up to that stage. Using what you do. All right, so now that we have a stop button here, one more time we're going to align it, or you can align it really however you want. I think we've learned how to move things around enough. But using that same principle of numbering systems, we'll just throw it you know, 16 pixels down. Cool. So now we have a pretty basic music player. Maybe we'll throw in, you know, you can choose to do this if you want, the title, and then we'll be done. So any song requests?
Freebird.
Freebird. Awesome. Freebird on Hacktorial, the album. Cool. Alrighty. So here's our super simple intro to Illustrator. Use of these principles we learned. And if we dissect what we've created, or let's call this Terrapin Hackers, the artist, and then Freebird. Awesome. You're welcome to put that in if you want. It's just using the text tool and aligning as we had before. So if we break down this album, artwork, design, it's really not, it's not very aesthetic. I don't think anyone would use this. But for simplicity's sake, what we've created is two big groups, right? The top part, which is the song description, the title, the album artwork, and our player at the bottom, which shows the song position and the commands we have. Apparently, like, you open the app, the song starts playing, it's Freebird, and then you stop it. Like, that's all this app does. It's a great app. Everyone should download it. But we've used the principles that we went over to really make this happen. Our colors are in sync using the technique we used with HSB. Actually, we might not have gone over that for this one, but we can if we want to. We've used the principles of contrast to keep things the same that are similar, to group them in that way, and to keep things separate that are different. Whether you know it or not, we used a grid by implementing our numbering system in there. So we have 16 pixels, 32 pixels, which is 2 times 16. It's pretty awesome the way that this all came together. So that's a pretty basic intro to Illustrator. When you get to a place where you're comfortable with some of these basic tools and understanding these principles, your player app might look something more like this. And then we can get into totally crazy, awesome stuff with all different apps that do really cool things, all over the place. This is all created, like this example is all created really using the same principles that we went over. The colors are in sync in that it's emphasizing the right things by making them different or the same, etc., etc. So that's mobile app design. Hopefully you have like a basic intro to Illustrator with that. And at this point, I'll field some questions, and then we'll go into a really quick web design. So, any questions? Yes?
On my Illustrator, horizontal line center to stop doing it.
Okay, so if you're in that situation, what it's trying to do is center it about itself for the selection. What you'll need to do is click the Align panel, and in the top right, there's a little down arrow. You see that? You click it and you select Show Option. Here, I'll actually demonstrate. So we click Align, click the down arrow, and this will say Show, Show Options. And then down at the bottom right, we see Align To. And then you're going to click Align to Artboard. That says instead of aligning it to the selection, align it to the entire white area, which is the artboard. So now that you've done that, it should work. Is that right? Good to go? Awesome. Any other questions? Yes?
Okay, so like, is this same as like an image? Like, how would you be able to add like the action itself onto it?
Okay, so as we said before, this is a mock-up. This is pretty much saying, I want this app to look like this in the end, right? Illustrator will not make something that works, at least, in the way we're using it. What you can do with Illustrator that integrates into the rest of the workflow is things like exporting assets. It's things like, exporting the entire screen and then working with the developer to make that happen. But what's really cool is that what we've made is not very hard, right? To code up in the front end. When you break it down, this or even something more advanced like this, we've got a big box. We've got a few assets which will need to be exported separately as pictures. But this is text and an asset that should be generated by the app. It's all pretty straightforward. when you use the right principles. If you didn't use a numbering principle, the developer would have to ask the designer for every single measurement. But now that we've used that, we can correctly guess. Oh, well, it's a little bigger in the mock-up, so I'll just must not be 16, it must be 32. It allows you to do things like that. But really, I mean, Illustrator and like really the role of a designer is to be able to communicate how this design should work. Because in the end, you're not placing this picture and like making hotspots. You're really coding it natively, hopefully, when you're making the app. And so yeah. Web is a little different. Web has some techniques which allow you to go right into mock-up to live site, but I wouldn't suggest using any of them. They're not very fun. Alrighty, so any other questions? Any questions maybe about like some of the the principles? You don't see how any of them work with this, or why we did a certain thing, or how we did it? Yes.
Just in terms of sizing, is it just gut feeling how big different things should be, what feels good, what looks good, or
sort of? So there, in mobile, there's a fair amount of guidelines for this. So like Android and Apple both say how big a navbar icon should be, or how big some of those more stock elements should be. Whereas album artwork is not, Apple never said this is how you make a music player. And so you can decide those things. That's where like style comes in, right? And being like, that's kind of the role of a designer, right? Is to be able to understand those things and how big or small or what color to actually make these things once you've, passed the basics of, the commandments of how big things should be. That said, a lot of the decisions come pretty easily to me because I'm using these principles. It's easy to say, oh, that's too big. Let me bring it down one more. And then there's not as much gut work involved because you have this numbering system that you use. Cool. Any other questions? All right. So we're going to make a website. We're going to learn about grids. We're going to learn about, I guess, traditional layouts, things like that. In this case, is the Dropbox link working anymore? Is it still down? Yeah, it's still down? Okay. Well, then I will put this online for everyone. One moment, please. Cool. So I've put a file online called Web1. All this file really has is a grid system that we will use to make this happen. All right. Cool. So everyone go to the event, reload, and download that web template. Cool, cool, cool. All right, so back to Illustrator. Thumbs up if you have the template.
did you set the permission so everybody gets to see?
Everyone should be able to. Just to be sure. What? All right. Link copied. That is so strange. Okay. Does everyone have that downloaded? Cool. So we'll go back into Illustrator and knock out a pretty wireframe version of this website. Does everyone's screen look something like this? Got some big blue lines. Yeah? Yeah? Blank white? Is it blank white? Okay, if it's blank white, try Command semicolon. It'll toggle the grid. Does that work for you? Does anyone else have blank white, or are we seeing the grid? You have blank white? Okay. In that case, check the layers and make sure the guides at the bottom is turned on by just clicking the little box there on the left. There's only one layer. Interesting. All right. Take 2. Just going to save over it with exactly what I have. Cool. Try re-downloading. All right. Does anyone have this? Okay, some people got it. So re-download. I'll go slow to start, but you should be at this point once you get that file. Cool. By the way, Control-0 if you ever get like thrown off and you lost your artboard, it'll bring you back to, or Command-0 for Macs, it'll bring you back to seeing the entire thing. So this is the famous 960 grid. It was created to kind of give order to web. All it is 12 major columns with gutters in between each of them. The columns are 60 pixels wide, and the gutters are 20 pixels total wide.
Hey, sorry, what was the file at the, this file is less updated.
Okay. Don't worry about the lines for now. You should still be able to follow along for the most part. Cool. So yeah, the point of this is most of the sites you've used probably have something along this line in terms of how the grid system is implemented. Was it? Oh yeah, forgot. Cool. So we're going to make a pretty simple website based on this. We'll pretty much go top down. So as we did before, just grab the rectangle tool and start in the top corner and drag all the way to the right. Don't worry about the height. This is assuming a full width header. So we can make the fill anything we want. This time we'll go green. We'll pick 80 and 80, or 80 and 100. Ooh, no, 80 and 80. Using that same coloring system we did before. So we should have a green box on top that goes all the way across. At this point, we'll go into transform, unselect the link icon if it has been selected, and make our height 80. Cool. So now we've got a pretty basic nav bar. What site are we making? Anyone? Any suggestions? What do you guys want to make on web?
Personal web page.
Personal web page. Awesome. So this will be the personal web page for Testudo. Alrighty. So we've got our box on top. We can make text by clicking the T on the left. Clicking anywhere, really. Write in your personal name if you want. And then we can select the text. And up on top, let's make the font size 18. Cool. So now we should have black text and a green nav bar. We'll place this text in the first column. So what that does is it aligns it with the very left of where the content of our web page will be. Cool. So to do that, you just drag the item until it snaps to the that second guideline there. Cool? Does everyone have that?
What's your font size?
We made it 18. Awesome. At this point, we'll make it white so that it contrasts with the green. Again, do that by clicking the item and just using the eyedropper on the white. Yeah, John?
Do you make your font size choices based off the memory system too?
Font sizes are different. Those are done a little more arbitrarily. They're done, kind of what looks right. The only insight I can really give on font size is that you should use as few as possible. So when we consider the hierarchy in typography, combining those two contrast properties together, we want to make sure that the big things look big and the small things look small. And so if we use a bunch of different 13, 14, 15, 16 for all your different things, they'll look very similar. So I would encourage sticking to as few font sizes as you can, and that allows you to really create more contrast between things. Yeah, so maybe this site would be 18 as the H2. We use 36 as the H1, and the body is all 14 or something. Cool. Are those terms like familiar? Those are just like heading styles in CSS. Cool. So now we should have some text in the nav bar. What we'll do at this point is center it with the green part. So all we'll do there is, again, using this numbering system, we'll select the middle reference point of the text. Again, transform, and then the middle dot. That says everything should be in reference to this middle point. And all we'll do is make the Y value 40. Since the big box was 80, 40 we'll put it right in the middle, vertically. And we've already put it on the far left of our website, before. So, by the way, if you're having trouble zooming in, it's just Command or Control plus and minus, and then 0 if you need to find that again. And you can just scroll around otherwise. Awesome. So now that we have testudo, or your name, we'll make a, let's say, login on the right. So all we need to do here is drag it using Alt or Option to make a duplicate. We're going to right align it, which will be on the top bar, and then bring it all the way to the left.
How do you make it exactly right next to the blue line?
So the way to do that, if you notice in this, unfortunately, all these guidelines are green right now, but if you notice this little dot right here, that's where the text starts. And so you can line that up with the blue line, and then it'll snap, and it'll say intersect. Illustrator will do that for you. And if you're having trouble, you can always go back to transform and just manually use the X values. So I can, say plus 60 or minus 60, knowing where it's going, and that'll make it pixel perfect with where you want it. Awesome. So now that we have that, we can double click into the text and just write login. No personal site should have a login, but that's okay. Keeping it basic. Cool. So at this point, maybe we want a big header picture. So we can, again, grab the rectangle, pull all the way across, making sure it's lining up with these lovely blue lines. Your width should be exactly 940. So if you need to, you can go into width, make it 940, and align as you see fit. Those are some pretty core commands, by the way. So hopefully at this point you've familiarized with how width and align works, because those are going to be used a lot. We can make it any color we want, but if we remember, before we had used 80 and 80 as the saturation and brightness. So to keep a nice color system going, we'll make it 80 and 80 again. And let's say we want this to be orange this time. Gold, sure. Pretty ugly color. It looks like vomit. We'll just do red. All right, cool. From here, if we remember, I prefer to use, when doing web, I prefer to use the tens numbering system. It especially aligns well with the 960 grid since it's done in 60-20, 60-20. So the same way we did the album artwork before, we're just going to line this big header image up with the green part and add 40 to the Y value. That gives it a little space. Alrighty. Does everyone have something that looks like this? Feel free to go off the beaten path. Maybe 60 or 80 is more your fashion. All right. At this point, we can, let's say our personal website wants to communicate 3 things. This is, again, like a pretty popular design pattern for product sites or personal sites. So we can make text boxes that again align with this grid system. So all we're going to do is click the T, and instead of just clicking this time, we're going to drag out a text box, same way we would a rectangle. So by aligning with this grid line, we can drag out, and we're going to go across four total columns. Cool. In here, we can put whatever words we want. I'm going to make sure mine is aligned correctly. Alrighty.
Is there an easy way to zoom out and back in?
Control plus and minus. Yeah. What was that? Alt and scroll. Huh. I never used that. That's awesome. Thank you. Great. So now we have a text box. What the text box will do is no matter how much we type, it'll jump into the next line and maintain this awesome text block. Feel free to populate it with as many words as you want. And at this point, we're just going to drag this text box and make 3 of them, trying to align as best we can to the grid system here. Cool. Have something like that. That was again using the Alt and drag method to copy things. I did Alt and dragged while holding Shift, so it locked in the position. And we just dragged them over and aligned them with these lines here. Cool. So I think that's about as far as this will go today. In terms of just how to do some of the basics of web design. Web and mobile are pretty similar in terms of how to create mockups, how the principles associate with each other. And I really would encourage everyone to just really use these principles of contrast and proportions, get to really know them, and it will pretty much do all the dirty work for you in terms of design decisions. This was, of course, really only focused on visual design. A big part of design, and something that every designer will kind of talk about a lot, is that design is very much about user experience and the decisions that command how a user will use this app or program or whatever else you're making. But the visual execution is also really important in terms of that user experience and in terms of just really creating a nice aesthetic product. Yeah, cool. So at this point, I am happy to be here all night. We can make more stuff. We can make a logo. We can talk more questions. But yeah, cool. Any questions? Yeah. Sure. If you didn't have the grid lines, those are just guides. So at some point you're going to want those. This was just from a template, so I would suggest using the template. But anyway, if there's an error of sorts, you can pretty much just understand how the numbers work. Actually, I wouldn't suggest that. The way to create grids, if that's what you're asking, is to go to View Rulers and Show Rulers. And then you can pull out those grid lines and make as many as you want. But again, that's what was done for us in the 960. If you are really having trouble with that, you're welcome to go to 960.gs and just download the source that I got it from. But we can troubleshoot afterwards if you guys are really having problems with the grid lines. Sorry if that happened to anyone. Yeah, Brennan.
How would you use design to scale to different screen sizes?
Awesome. So responsive, that's huge. What's really cool is that by using the numbering systems, it makes it really easy to switch between screen sizes. That goes for when you're designing web and you need to make it work on tablets or mobile, or if you're switching between iOS and Android mockups. So in this case, let's say we want to, I'm just going to quickly zoom through this, and I wouldn't suggest following along unless you're quick at it. But for instance, on this one, we can make this 640 width, right? For a phone, and then these elements will still just go together in a similar fashion. We can even use the same numbering system. The grid will If you're using like Bootstrap, the grid will adjust for you and will do actually a fair amount of this stuff already. But in terms of mockups, I can quickly like throw some of this in. But it's really just using the same principles, trying to keep to the same basic numbers that we did before. And then it'll all just kind of come together. So in this example, maybe for this mobile view, we want these text boxes to stack. So we can align them as they were before, and then just pull out the text boxes. So that's kind of like a very janky way to switch it over, or a quick way to do it. The main goal when doing responsive is to maintain the same flow as you had before, at least for responsive web, to maintain the same kind of usage of the product while adjusting to the different platforms or visual specs needed. So if the goal is to go from left text block, right text block, or middle text block, right text block, that translates really quickly to first, second, third vertically. So kind of just harnessing some, responsive could be its own talk. Really, there's so much to learn about it, but hopefully if you've used consistent numbering, you can just carry the styles into the next product. Cool. Any more questions? Yeah. Resources. Awesome. So if you want to continue learning, hopefully you do, there's so much stuff out there. I'd say a few good places to start would be like the Tuts Plus network, which I don't know, I haven't used those in a while, but PSD Tuts or something like that. In terms of like inspiration, if you guys are going out and like really want to get better at design, I would suggest going to a site that you really enjoy and just trying to do that, to make that site. Using the tools that are provided to you. Dribble's a pretty cool place to explore for design inspiration. And a lot of people will get started in like graphic design or UI design by picking something here or elsewhere and trying to make it. So picking something, drag it into Illustrator, do it right on top, and you'll start to see like some of the trends in design, some of the techniques used to, oh, why does that look so beautiful? Oh, it's just half of the box outside of it. And you'll start to pick up some of those like little tricks that really put some polish on more experienced designers' work. Yeah. I can send out I don't like have a full list right now with me, but I can definitely send out a full design resources list. Actually, I do have a list on me in Evernote. Design sites. So here's some of them actually. I will make this more extensive and then send it out. Cool. Any more questions? I'm happy to guinea pig any other things we want to make, or if we want to flesh out some of those projects more. Anything else?
Logo sounds great.
Logo sounds great.
Well, I was going to say logo as well.
Logo? All right, let's make a logo. Awesome. So I really enjoy logos. Here are just some of the I guess more logo-focused things that I've made. And in terms of like how to make a logo, you really want to start first by picking what a logo is trying to communicate, right? Yes? Oh, for a logo? That'd be great. Make a logo for TV. Sure. We'll make a logo for TV. So anyway, at the core, the point of a logo is to communicate a brand's values or what it does or something along those lines. And so you really want to think of like what we're trying to really communicate with this. So if we're doing a logo for a TV, we wanted to show that it's that it's a TV, and maybe it's a really fun TV. It's like a new TV. So we're going to use like fun colors, let's say. So we'll go into Illustrator. I'm not really gonna. There's a lot that can be said about like how to come up with logo concepts, but in terms of like some fundamental visual principles for logo design, we can walk through that now, because the whole how to brand is a totally different topic that would take more time to discuss. Cool. Logos, at least the way I usually make them, makes extensive use of grids. So for this one, we'll start. Just press Control New, Control N, Command N. And click Web, and then in the drop-down for size, go to 800 by 600. It'll just get us started all on the same canvas here. And at this point, what we'll do is Command apostrophe, which brings up this lovely grid, and then Command Shift apostrophe, which means lock to that grid. Okay, so Command apostrophe and then Command Shift apostrophe. And now, if you'll notice, everything locks to this grid. Now, there's tons and tons of different visual styles out there for logos. I can only speak to the one that I use often, but many logos will be like much more organic or maybe text heavy or things like that. Just Control N.
Okay.
And then profile web, size 800 by 600. It really doesn't matter. We just want the same canvas. So while my style uses extensive use of the grid, others may not, and there's no right way to do this. Everyone should understand that. Cool, but the point of using a grid is that everything we do will be as simple as possible. In logo design especially, you're trying to communicate a set of values or a message that is that is going to be extensively used in many different media types. And so the image we create should not be necessarily like a flyer. A flyer has tons of information on it, right? It's got graphics, it's got text, maybe more things. A logo is really trying to get down to the core of what a brand does or is trying to communicate. And then tries, in my opinion, we should try to communicate that in as simple logo as possible. So a grid helps with that. For a TV, we'll just quickly throw something together. Let me pick a. Let's see. So for our TV, we're just going to make this lovely TV icon. And awesome. I'll walk through how to do this in a sec.
How do you make the grid finer?
How do we make the grid finer?
Yeah.
I don't follow.
It's like, you do the grid, you want to make them smaller.
Oh, so you can actually adjust the grid size in the properties. I haven't done that. But do you mean like zoom in and out? I've zoomed in a lot.
Like big chunks, I want to make them like smaller.
I don't follow.
So like of each of these squares, right? I want to make each unit in terms of length smaller.
Oh, yeah, so that would be done in properties. File, document setup, probably. Oh, no, sorry. It's in preferences. And then you can go to grids and guides. And then here, grid line every 72, subdivision every 8. That's where you would adjust it. Does that make sense? Cool. The funny thing is this, Hassan, when you're designing a logo, especially, like, what matters here is not the true size of it. If we remember, this is vector. So this logo might be, in an app icon or on a billboard. And so the actual true size of what we're making right now doesn't matter since it's so scalable. What matters is the proportions and the relationships between those numbers, not the numbers themselves. So if this is our end goal here, how does this look? This is, oh, what a lovely logo. Let's see. Why don't we redesign a logo that's already been made? That'll be easier. A good example of this would be TiVo. No, not TiVo. TiVo's got a hideous logo. We're going to remake a logo that I made once called Amp Vita. Cool. So if this is the logo we're making, what you can notice is that, first of all, it's all done on this grid system. Everything is, very fundamentally done, and I'll walk you through why that is. So if this is our end goal, let's get started. What we'll do first is let's say we know that we're going to use like 2 of these big subdivisions, right? 2 of the big boxes. And so we'll make a quick circle inside of those boxes. So the way circles work is you'll start at the midpoint and drag out. In this case, we're going to hold Shift or Alt to bring it all the way out. Cool? And the way to make it, if we remember, there's fills and strokes with every object. And so we're going to make this one a stroke by clicking fill and making it the slashed out transparency. And then you can pick any color you want for the stroke here. Cool. So now does everyone have like a ring? Yeah. Yeah, so the way we're snapping to the grid, first of all, do you see the grid?
Yes.
Okay, the way to snap to the grid is by holding Command Shift apostrophe. You just click it once and everything should snap now. Does that work? Cool. Or if that's not working, View, Snap to Grid. We'll do that. Awesome. Cool. All that does is it means that we don't have to fiddle with the dimensions. It'll just snap right to that already proportionally perfect grid. Cool. So now we have a ring the size of 2 of the large squares. So at this point, we're going to try to keep as many awesome proportions as we can. This is kind of a way to just make your logos come out I guess cleaner and more appealing to the eye, is to try to stick to as many simple proportions as you can. So now I'll introduce the pen tool, and we'll make this first A. So the pen tool is all the way on the left here. Does everyone see that icon? Just click that, and this will also snap to the grid. And all we'll do is find the exact middle of the top left box. So it's 4 in and 4 down. Click there. Drag it to the middle point that's 4 up from the bottom, right? So if we find the exact middle, we just go down 1, 2, 3, 4 clicks, and then tap there. And then we'll go up to the middle of the top right box. Cool. So we've got a V. Awesome. Does everyone have a V? If it's not appearing, it might be the stroke. You can use whatever you want. I think right now I'm using 10. So you can make it 10. You can make it 5. Cool. So we have a V. What we can do now is actually just save some work, copy, Control-C, and then Control-F to place it back in place. And then what we'll do is just rotate this one around. Cool. So what I did was I selected the V. I did Control-C, Control-F. Don't unselect, but just hover over to the bounding box corners, and you'll see that rotation icon. You can click that and drag it around. So if you do that while holding Shift, it should be able to snap into the exact upside down version. Do we have that? Puzzling looks.
Where'd you get the V's?
Where'd I get the V? Well,
I got carried away.
okay. Someone can catch you up.
Okay.
Cool. So if we're at this point, I'll quickly introduce the Pathfinder tool. Pathfinder tool is it's like a slightly more advanced tool, but it makes Illustrator really powerful because it allows you to cut things out of other things. So what we'll do in this case is just draw a rectangle on actually, we'll just make a more simple version of this. I won't get into the Pathfinder today. So at this point, we have our V's and our A's. We're going to select both of those. Just click on one and then shift click on the other. We can go over to stroke and click these two middle icons. What one of them is doing is says at the end, make it go rounded, and at every joint, make it rounded also. So click those middle two things for cap and corner, and we have that. And then we'll just draw one more line in the middle. It should maintain the same stroke. And there you have it. If we want, I can show you how to cut it out. Would that be helpful? Yeah? Got nods? Awesome. First of all, is everyone like up to this point or knows how to get there? No. Okay, where are you, Rob?
I also lost you at V, so.
Lost me at V. I'll show it again. So all this was selecting the pen tool, which is on the left. It's the third icon down. So you shouldn't drag. We're just clicking.
Oh, okay.
When you drag, you create what are called Bezier curves. We want straight lines. So just click, and it'll continue the line anyway. So we're clicking in the dead middle of one of the boxes on the top left box. Then we're getting the midpoint, the like center down, and then the middle of the top right box. Cool, do you have that, V? But inside your circle. And then just copy, paste it, and flip it around by selecting it and using the rotation tool. Cool, maybe John can catch you up. All right, so at this point, this is a slightly more advanced feature, but again, is like, oh yeah, you had a question? Select both V's. You can do that by just dragging on top of it. You can either click one and while holding shift, click the other, or just drag on a part of that area that touches both of them. For some reason, it's selecting the circle for me. I don't know why. So I would just select one and then the other. When selecting strokes, it's a little tricky. When selecting strokes, since they're just paths, you have to select in like the dead middle of that area. If you see here, we have to select this blue part and not the red. The red is just kind of an outline on that path. So we're really trying to select the path, which will be in the middle of that area. Cool, awesome. Glad you're able to follow along. Okay, so now we're going to get into Pathfinder. We'll start by creating a rectangle. The rectangle will go from 2 clicks above the middle to 2 clicks below the middle. And just drag it over the portion we're going to want to cut away. In this case, you kind of have to neglect the visuals of it now, understanding that this is really just a path that we're going to use to cut away from the other part. So now that we've dragged that on top, we can click Shift and then the V part. So now we have selected both of them. And what Pathfinder is going to do, we're going to subtract them, which means that whatever layer is on top is going to be subtracted from the bottom. So in the Pathfinder tool, by the way, if you don't see Pathfinder, it's just Windows Pathfinder. In the Pathfinder tool, now that we've selected both, we go there, and we can click this subtraction icon, or minus front. And what this will do is cut it away. It's the second icon in, by the way, on the Pathfinder part. So as we can see, it made some funky stuff. And here's where we'll get into another slightly more advanced part. So far we've been using the main selection tool. It's the black cursor on the top left. But in order to get rid of one part of this path, we're going to need the direct selection tool, which is the whited out arrow just to the right or below, depending on your configuration of the cursor. So everyone grab the direct selection tool and make sure you're at this part, or ask any questions if you're not. Yeah. Yeah, sure. So stay where you are if you've already done it, but all we did was we grabbed a rectangle. We are dragging from 2 clicks above the middle to 2 clicks below the middle, and then all the way across the part that's going to be affected. Cool? So we have that rectangle. Now, before releasing anything, or actually, you can press V. That goes to the selection tool. It's a quick shortcut. And then while holding Shift, we're going to select the V. Awesome. So now we have selected two objects, or two paths. One is on top of the other, even though it doesn't look like it. One is layered on top of the other. And now we're going to use the Pathfinder tool to subtract them, which cuts out whatever's on top from whatever's underneath. We do that again by selecting both, going to Pathfinder. If you don't see Pathfinder, Windows Pathfinder, and you'll have it. And then it's the second icon in, which means subtract. The first one, by the way, is addition. You can imagine what that does as well. So now that we have this, we're going to go to the direct selection tool, which again is the whited out arrow. And we're just going to grab the parts that we don't want. And the way I'm doing this is I'm just dragging over the parts that I know are there, and then just selecting or pressing delete. And what that'll do is only delete the part that we've selected as opposed to the whole object. So if you remember, a vector is comprised of different points and paths between them. So by using the direct selection tool, we're able to select not just the entire object, but a part of that path and delete it. Yeah, so just make sure you're only selecting the part that you want. Drag over it, delete. I can demonstrate one more time. We hit direct selection, drag, delete, and drag, delete. Cool, yeah. You have a question? Oh, cool. Is everyone here? Is anyone here? Yeah. Bravo, bravo. Where are we having trouble? I can go over Pathfinder again. Yeah? The points. It may not appear like you're selecting them, but you are. If you drag over the line and just press delete, it should do it. Is that working? You have to make sure that you're not selecting the points. So if you notice, the way I did that was by dragging over a part that's only the line. See this? And then release, delete, and it should grab that. If you are dragging from all the way over here, it's also grabbing another path and a point, and it'll delete more than what we want. So just make sure we're grabbing the right parts and delete. Cool. Got it? All right, awesome. Yeah, that's a logo. We've used some more advanced features than I was expecting to go over, but if you were able to follow along, that's pretty awesome. And now you'll know more when you make logos in the future. But again, like this is a pretty simple object if we think of it. It's made on, really, I mean, this could even be comprised on a 4x4 grid. If we look at where those intersections of the points are, you know, we could have made it even simpler, or actually not quite. But by keeping it simple with the grids, by using a numbering system, you know, 2s and 4s as we did in this version. Did you make a menorah? Oh man, looks good. We've separated objects that are different, grouped ones that are the same. All those principles came into play here to make something that hopefully serves as a logo. Cool. Did anyone get all the way through that? Awesome, awesome. For those who didn't, should we go over the troubleshooting, or do you want to just move on to something else? Cool. By the way, if you've really been zoning in, it's now 9:50. If anyone has plans at 10, it's a good time to leave. But I am happy to go over more. What's next, y'all? Questions? New things we should make? You're welcome to just sit. What we can do now, if there's nothing we want to go over, in a sec. If there's nothing we want to go over, y'all are welcome to kind of just experiment with Illustrator. And if you run into things you want to do, ask me. Or just we can do individual stuff. I can critique websites, anything like that. I'm happy to do now. So cool. Brandon, what were you going to say?
If you were to make a logo that's more how would you use it?
It's something I'm not very good at. A lot of like my design style is in this like minimalist, like focused on the grid part. And I honestly, like, if anyone went through what I've made, it's very, very in line with that. If you're like, I want to draw an elephant or something, it's not a skill I have, but you can do that in like Illustrator. There are ways to do more organic things. For instance, the pen tool we talked about before can do like Bezier curves. And so you can like do pretty precise and more organic things with it. It's just not something I do often. And even when I do, even when I make like the more organic shapes, it usually is locked into this grid system. So if I'm making like, a swoopy V or something, I'll really do it by using the grid system as close as I can, because that's kind of just my style, I guess. If you're just getting started, it makes it easier to do, to be honest. It keeps things simple, and in the end, I think, in terms of my aesthetic, I think that's what I enjoy. Yeah. Cool. Unless there's something that you guys want me to do, y'all are welcome to experiment, and I can come around and answer questions and whatnot. But thanks to Terp and Hackers for having me, and hit me up in the future if you need anything. Cool, cool? Yeah, sounds good. See ya, remote people.